Here to talk to you a little bit. Actually, this is not my usual crowd, but and I hope this goes well. This is kind of what I'm about to say is kind of antithesis to all the things that you guys are about. So we'll see how this goes. You know, for those of you that are going to leave right away, I've kind of summarized the talk in one slide. So again, I changed the title, and you know, I do have a PhD in engineering from Berkeley and electrical engineering, computer science, and so this is Caltech, and I know there were some tech people. I changed the title to .h, which is kind of a header file, points to H++, you know, which is, I know you guys are H+, but kind of looking beyond, and since this is the last session of looking at kind of these radical technomorphosis, thought I'd throw that there. So the .h is usually a header file, which kind of tells you, provides some context of what the thing's about. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit, actually most of my talk is going to be around kind of the physis versus techne debate, which has been going around for at least 2,500 years or so, since the ancient Greeks. And I'm going to make a case for natural intelligence, and really, the main message here is it's not really about what we know or what we have or where we're going, but really the idea is how do we develop technologies to look at how we interrelate. And the main thing about this is really looking at how do we act from joy versus kind of fear, need, and desire, which is somatically informed, you know, and so really looking at the relationship kind of between the mind and the body and how the mind developed and all of this, and really developing an understanding of the emotions that underlie action. And so as I mentioned, I did start out in electrical engineering, computer science, and then I got involved in digital entertainment for about 20 years, doing video games and animation and stuff. And for the last 8 years, I've been in the area of creativity. I teach a class called Recovering Creativity in Hong Kong. And for the last 5 years or so, I've been in the area of consciousness studies. I hosted the Tucson conference last year in Hong Kong, the Tour de Science of Consciousness that Ben came out to. And I founded the Asia Consciousness Festival that just happened again last couple weeks ago in Hong Kong. And there we're really looking at the relationship between mind and matter. So physically, all of you are kind of sitting in this auditorium, and I'm standing in front of you with this red jacket on. But in this conversation, we seem to be somewhere as well. So the question that we're really looking at, what is the relationship between this mental space that we're in this conversation, assuming that you understand me and that none of you are, oh, most of you are, except, you guys making out back there? Oh, no, sorry. So except for, you know, those of you that are paying attention to me versus, you know, paying attention to your laptops and everything. So to start this and to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, I'd like to start with a phenomenological experiment. And there's going to be a money prize. I've got money on the table here. I'm going to ask a question, so just to get your attention even more. So those of you that, now that money's on the table, I notice all the computers or people are focused on me. And so what I'd like you to do right now for a second is just focus your full awareness and attention on me right now. You know, it's the narcissist in me. I just really like it when people focus on me. And so what I'd like you to do is bring as much of your attention and awareness as you can, and then just focus on me. Oh, this is a pretty good room. And so as you're focusing on me, you'll notice some of you here can probably hear the air conditioning. You can feel your body. You can feel how you're breathing. You can feel your legs. You can feel your groin. You can feel your body. Yeah, and you can hear the different sounds around. Oh, stay focused on me. Here, focus on me. And just for a second, just feel what, phenomenologically, just feel what this experience is. Now, today is December 5th, 2010. Chinese New Year is February 3rd, 2011. How many days is it from today until Chinese New Year's? $5. How many days? Exactly. Count it out. Okay, $20. Anyone? How many days from today, which is December 5th, to February 3rd? Exactly. How many? No? Count it out. Count it out. How many days? Yeah, days, calendar days. Is it 61? Wait, I thought it was 50 something. I had this earlier. Okay, let's say 61. I'll give it to you. Since you organized it, here's the reward. The point that I wanted to get across is that when I ask you to be here and be fully present, phenomenologically, that felt a certain way. And you had access to the sounds, the information in the room, etc. But when I asked you to do the calculation, what happened? Where did you go? Really? Well, for those of you that did the calculation, where did you go? Usually, typically what happens is the eyes move, you'll go into some kind of computational thing. But then when you do the calculation or computation in your mind, phenomenologically, you become disconnected from where we are right now. You'll notice if you ever go into thought. And when you talk to people, you'll notice the eyes move as well, too. So if I focus on you, if I ask you to focus on me right now, and what did you have for lunch 4 days ago without moving your eyes?
I don't know.
Yeah, can you remember?
Not when I'm focusing.
Right. So in order for you to remember, it turns out your eyes have to move. And there is some relationship between eye movement and memory access. And there's also related to emotion as well, too. So emotion is also very much tied to it. And so neurologically, it turns out we can't be present and in thought at the same time. And not only that, on the eye movement side, where your eyes move, the directions that your eyes move, also are also indicative of what kind of memory access you're doing, whether it's a visual constructed, visual remembered, auditory constructed or remembered, kinesthetic, digital, auditory, digital. But the question that I have is, where do you go? So physically you're here, but where do you go? So in mathematics, we have the square root of -1, which is this imaginary space, which is where you and I are in right now. So physically we're in this room, but in this conversation, we seem to be somewhere as well. Right? And so what is this? And I argue, and where this comes back to video games and media and everything, is that when you play a video game or when you read a book or when you watch a movie, you're in this same place that you and I are in right now, in this mental realm. Right? And there seems to be a relationship between this mental realm and the physical body. So, if I'm sad or depressed or low energy, it's going to be very different from if I'm wired or hyper or, what happened. Whether I'm happy or sad, you can kind of tell. When someone's yawning, I can kind of tell I need to speed up. So the question is, where is this? And it seems like a space, So when I talked to Ben about the workshop that we did on AGI in Hong Kong, we have, remember the room that we were in, the circular auditorium? Yeah, so it seems like we have a same referential map. It seems like we can talk about the chairs and the place and everything, but so what is this and where is this? And where is this from? So if we think about the original, mentally construct, how we build a mental construct, and we think of the origins. So a lot of people talk about the last person on Earth. I like to think of the first person on Earth. So here we have Adam. Arguably, I know this is the wrong crowd for this. So here's the first person that became aware of himself and became aware of nature. So the thing is, he observes nature, phusis, he observes nature, builds a model of it, a mental construct, call it a sunflower, what have you, and builds a mental construction of it. And with that mental construction, they're able to share that mental construction with somebody else. So this is Eve, so this is one of the first conversations. And from that, he's also able to create things. But some of the problems with the mental constructed model is, number one, is it's an abstraction of what it really is. And number two, it's actually an abstraction of what it was. Because it was, when he experienced it, that's what it was. And now he's got a mentally constructed model of what it was, but it may have changed. And so by applying this mental model, I can actually create new things. in the material world, in phusis. And the ancient Greeks were very careful to distinguish between phusis and techne. Phusis are things that just happen in nature. So the stars, the galaxies, etc., versus techne, which have gone through the filter of the mind. So if we think of this kind of collective space that we're in, think of all the people that were ever alive, and all of us, and all 7 billion people on the planet today, and this collective mental space that we've all created right now. That's kind of like everything. And so if I'm one person, I've got a personal reality, and as I learn things and read and experience the world, I kind of can grow this, and then we're also kind of growing this all out as well too. But if we think of the relationship between this mental world and the material world is just phusis and a projection of techne. So if you look at every single thing that you see here right now, from the clothes that I'm wearing to this thing here to every little detail, came from somebody's mind. There's a relationship between every little particle, the position of this podium, this cord hanging here. There's a relationship between everything that's here and this collective mental space that we're in. Okay, so we have phusis and techne, and there's a relationship, and techne is in phusis. It has to happen within nature, and we're just using nature based upon the mentally constructed model that we have of nature and the collective mental. So this is kind of like the Plato's cave kind of thing, where we're just a projection at this moment. The mental world is here. So the issue here is that all the problems, if you look at all the problems in the world, and this is a frightening book, so if you look at where we're going, the reason why, what motivates all of you, why Ben wants to build an AGI, why we want to understand the brain and all this other stuff, is because we've got all these, it seems like we've got all these problems in the material world today. And we're trying to solve them by building more things out here, when actually, the problems all come from here, right? We're out of balance with nature. We've kind of gone beyond, if you will, to be as bold as to, the whole transhuman thing is about going kind of this techne versus phusis debate of techne over, having the illusion or having the idea that, we're going to be greater than 10 minutes? Okay, phusis. So we have all these problems in the world today. 1 or 10? Okay, good. Okay, so we have these problems in the world, and they actually come from the mind. And so a little bit, what we're trying to do with video games right now, too, is really understand how does media influence physiology. So if there was a lion here, or a terrorist coming in, assume Osama bin Laden comes in with some of his terrorists, and they're packed with these vest suicide bomb things. We should feel fear. All of us should feel fear. And what happens when we feel fear? Our pupils dilate, our blood pressure changes, our digestion stops. All of these physiological processes happen to prepare us to physically fight, flee, or freeze, right? And this is from an evolutionary psychology point of view. But the thing about this is that if, let's say, Ben's got his investment for his AGI in this big stock, and the company just went under, what's going to happen? I've lost my whole investment, my whole savings. What's going to happen to him physiologically? It's the same thing. His pupils are going to dilate, his breathing is going to change, his blood pressure changes, his digestion changes, and everything. But the problem with that, though, is that these chemicals that get injected, ATH, adrenaline, all these other things, will affect his perception of reality, but there's nothing physically threatening him. So he's just basically doing drugs, in a sense. So if you look at media in this way, media is like doing drugs. So when you're watching a film and you get scared, or when you play a video game, you're basically throttling, and you're messing with your autonomic nervous system, and you've got dopamine that you're kicking in as well, the epic win, and all these other things. So you're basically, and essentially, self-medicating yourself. Okay? And the thing is that if you can bring yourself fully present, right here and right now, everything's fine. Right? So in terms of the fear, the anxiety, and all these other things that are motivating action, where are they coming from? They're coming from this mentally constructed reality that's entirely, I mean, it's a dream of a dream, right? It's entirely within the realm of the mind. And so with that, so there's a difference between an intellectual knowing versus an experiential knowing. Now we could debate, Rosenblum, well, whose AI is better? Is it Ben's? Is it Rosenblum's? We can debate that. So there's intellectual knowing, which, is tied to the mind and ideas in the mind. And you guys can say, Gino, you're full of shit. I don't believe any of this crap. Go back to Hong Kong, right? And so we can go there and we can debate that in an intellectual kind of way. But there's a difference between an intellectual knowing something intellectually and knowing that you have to go to the bathroom. So if Amy really had to go to the bathroom, let's say she had diarrhea or something, I say, Amy, you don't have diarrhea. You don't have to go to the bathroom. She's like, no, Gino, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, no. It's not. You're fine. So there are different mechanisms in here and there's a different kind of knowing. So the whole point behind this is there's a different kind of knowing that's not an intellectual knowing, but it uses the same physiological system. And so there is a direct experience through the 5 senses. And there's a difference between, and this is a very important thing, there's a very big difference between, and I'm going to sound a little bit crazy for a second, more crazy than I am right now. But, right now there's the feeling of my jacket. There's the 5-minute sign that just got posted up. There's the woman in purple that just walked in. There's all of this stuff that's happening right now, right? And right now, I'm married. I have a wife. I have 4 kids. Those are just ideas. Hong Kong is just an idea. So there's the direct experience of this moment through my 5 senses, and I know how that's influencing my physiology versus the ideas, the thoughts and ideas. And there's a difference there. Phenomenologically, there's a difference. But experientially, it gets blurred in terms of the emotions, etc. And so the thing is that if we can bring ourselves fully, a different kind of knowing emerges. And this is kind of, there was an one of the speakers mentioned, well, intuition. And so the idea here is really listening to the physiology. And so when what was his name again? When Patry talked about diet and, what do you do? How do you lose weight? And what do you do about diet? You could read books or you could listen to your body. Hey, how's that? So arguably there is a natural intelligence in the physiology. There is the same forces that are moving all the things that are combining all these DNAs that are keeping these 50 trillion plus cells in your body alive are the same forces that are moving this, creating the new stars in the heavens, right? The galaxies, etc. They're all driven by the same force. And so the thing about this is really how do we move out of kind of a mentally driven model and then looking at what are the underlying forces that motivate action. And the thing is that if you could pull yourself fully present, and if right here and right now everything is fine, the natural state is joy. And so action from joy somatically feels very different from action from fear, need, and desire. It just feels different. Fear, your breathing is going to change. Your breathing is held. Need and desire. The eyes kind of. There's energy charge. There's a kind of compulsion with that too. Versus joy, which is an engagement. So it's very different teaching your kids how to play basketball or do math versus playing with your dog. When you're playing with your dog, there's an active engagement and there's a presence there, but there's not really it has to be done this way. There's no kind of force. There's just playing with and reacting and interacting with the reality that presents itself. And so through our conditioning and through growing up, we've built this kind of reality system, this kind of personal reality. And for each person, it's very different. The weather, and so for most people, it's my current project, my job, my career, my family, my relationship with mortality, or not. But at the source of all of this is an inner experience within everybody. And it's the experience that right here and right now, it's good to be alive. And the question is, if you can feel that and connect to that, and work from that, then as you're engaging this field of time, space, reality, what have you, what is it that takes you out of that? And that will usually point to some emotional attachment to some idea or belief in your head. And so as we follow your bliss, and as you work with that, and start deconstructing this conditioned, this emotionally conditioned mental framework that we have, then, and bring in forgiveness and compassion and all of this other stuff, your relationship with reality changes. So right now we're using video games, arguably, to help understand that and understand that relationship. So video games engage the mind, but then with biofeedback, we're using EEG, heart rate variability, a lot of these other things to look at the physiology and look at the conscious decisions that are made. And based on looking at that, I can get a sense of what your worldview is. What are the vectors that are motivating the action? And I can design experiments with games, and I can look at how people respond, and then I can personalize that response with the goal of helping them untangle their conditioning to rediscover the joy of just being. And so the big message for all of this is it's great work and all this other stuff is the map, the models that we have are not the territory, which is the conscious experience of this moment. At a very deep level, you have to ask yourself, what is this? Right? I mean, here I am. Here we are. I'm from Hong Kong. What is this? And so the question is that if everybody acted from joy rather than fear, need, and desire, what would the world be like? And now the great thing about it is with this exponential IT stuff, the internet and all these other things, digital media, interactive, et cetera, biofeedback, all this low-cost stuff, is that arguably most of the problems are caused from action from the mind. Digital media almost exclusively influences the mind. So how do we take this exponential technology that's growing and apply it to kind of reprogramming the mind? And this is something I asked Bill Gates too. I mean, he gave a talk, said 20 years we've been trying to program computers to do new things, and I basically said, hey, now computers are programming us, if you look at the media and everything. So how can we use media to reprogram us? And so the question is, what if everyone acted from joy rather than fear, need, and desire? Because it's the 30th anniversary, I just thought I'd share with you my vision of the answer. That's it.
Thank you.